today we are so excited to have at Hiring for Good, Maya Chamberlin. Maya is the executive director for the Friendly House, and she has such a unique story to share. So we're going to just kind of jump in and turn this conversation over to you, and we'll probably ask a whole bunch of questions while you're telling the story. And
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. So why don't we kick it off to really get a good understanding of you and your background and life at the Friendly House?
So my coworkers will not think highly of me if I don't correct you. We're Friendly House, not the Friendly House. This is a big point of contention at work. So yeah, I actually was born and raised in Northwest Portland, right where Friendly House is located, and attended preschool there. And we are a 94-year-old organization established in that area. Been around a long time. So Friendly House for me was just part of the place that I walked by every day from home and school, even after I graduated preschool. And I grew up in that neighborhood, and it was the place that our parents would let us hang out. Like if it was getting dark and we were still out, like if you're at Friendly House, it's okay, but anywhere else you need to come home. So it was a great place, and we still, like a lot of my peers are still connected to Friendly House in a variety of ways. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I after school was just trying to figure myself out, and was living in Northwest still, and went in to see if I could volunteer. I had volunteered with Friendly House as a teenager and came back and thought, well, I need to figure something out. And I thought I wanted to work with kids. And so my former preschool teacher was still there, Glenda. And so I went to talk to Glenda to see if she had any volunteer positions. And she didn't at the time. And she sent me to the after school program, which we still have this many years later. But I went up there, and the director of the program was like, yeah, we're short-staffed, which is not an unusual story. So here's your badge and jump in. And within a few hours, towards the end of the day, he offered me a position in the after-school program, and there I was, back working with school-agers in our after-school program. So we have about 120 kids each day from Chapman Elementary. And so that was great. I did that for a couple of years. We have our summer camp that runs in between the school years. And then eventually I fell in love with a coworker, and we left Friendly House for a while and had our daughter. When she was 2, we separated, and both of us went back to Friendly House in different positions. I came back working in our senior program, and he was working in the preschool. We maintain an excellent relationship, but our daughter then started preschool there, and I was working as a case manager in our senior program. And I think that was when, for me, I had found my place. I worked with older adults as a case manager. We provide supports and services, case management, information and referral, transportation coordination for older adults who are living independently on the west side of Multnomah County. And then we have another program called Elder Pride Services, which provides those same services, but specifically for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender elder adults who are living independently within Multnomah County. So I did that for a couple of years, and then got promoted to be the manager of that program. And over time, kind of took on our social service programming, which included at the time a transitional housing program for families, and just kind of kept, being available for opportunities when they came up, and sort of fell into a variety of positions, and 20 years later, I am thrilled and honored to be the executive director of Friendly House.
And I'd like to add, if anybody, well, let me back up. Growing up also in Portland, I was not aware of Friendly House. I even went to Lincoln High School, which is, right there, But what an amazing service, and to be around 90 plus years. And when I did the tour, there's a gym, they have classes, it was senior citizens, the classrooms for the littles. One of the neighborhood schools, it was a rainy day, was using the gym because it was either that or play outside or not have any exercise. I mean, it was amazing to see how this has grown in a neighborhood within Northwest Portland. And everything that you took on, especially during COVID, and matching how our city is changing, and then you change what needs and services you offer. And
so that's our whole mission is about building community, and we do that through a variety of ways, right? We and one of our core tenets is about responding to the needs of a changing neighborhood or a changing community. I think we were talking about COVID. That's such a stark example of something that happened so quickly, none of us saw coming. But kind of overnight, we were able to keep all of our staff employed and started doing delivering emergency food boxes to older adults, and neighbors set up drop box locations for toilet paper, hand sanitizer, canned foods, and staff who had been working with children just 2 weeks before were going around and emptying these donation bins and taking them out to people that we were hearing needed additional support. And so it was, that was a very specific example, but I think one of the things about our longevity is the ability to transition over time. And so anybody who's been around Northwest Portland for any length of time knows it looks really different now than it did 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 90 years ago.
Wow.
And, we were founded as a settlement house. And for people who are familiar with settlement houses, there's some problematic history there. At the time, it was really about helping people to assimilate into community. And I think, 90 years later, we're really working on taking the pieces of settlement house tradition that still work. And a significant piece of that is our ability to stay flexible and nimble and respond to changing needs. And it is not about assimilation anymore, but about creating a sense of belonging and purpose and reciprocity. And that's, I think, just what community is.
Well, that's so interesting. I think as a leader, it's a different model to kind of grow up within the organization and have these, themes or sort of cultural elements of the organization that you either hold on to or, do away with if need be. What other formative leadership experiences? I mean, COVID is obviously a very specific example, but, when you think about yourself as the leader of this body now, what other formative experiences have you had that have shaped the way that you run your organization and the way that you build your teams?
In our industry, which is, notoriously low rates, we're looking at other ways to, to compensate people, to make people feel valued, appreciated for their work. And I think that was certainly something that for me as a young case manager, I felt like I knew coming into Friendly House and my predecessor, I always felt like my voice mattered. I felt like even though I was, low on the food chain, as it were, I could go to her and talk to her about what was going on in my personal life, or I had an idea about something we could do differently, and it was always taken seriously. And I remember that was a huge draw to me to be at Friendly House and to stay there for as long as I did, because I wanted to be a part of something that mattered. And I think if there's anything I can carry from kind of when I was understanding the importance of that, is really making sure that we're giving voice not only to our staff, but to a low-income family that's being served by preschool, or an older adult who's having their independence taken from them, but just really remembering that we're all here doing the very best we can with the tools that we have, and really taking people seriously, listening to ideas, and really figuring out how and when it's appropriate to incorporate them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that we learn from others, but we also have this sense of values internally within ourselves. And we do project that as leaders. So when you're looking at motivating and directing, walk us through some of what you bring to the table.
That's a great question. I wish our team was here to answer that. I think what I value the most in our team is their cooperation, their intuition, their desire to live and be the values that we are looking to encompass, and like our leadership team, for example. I am the newest at my position of anybody at the table. Yeah. So, if it weren't for our leadership team, I'm not sure that I would be in this position right now. I am a new executive director. I didn't have any sort of schooling to help take me here. It was really my experiences, my willingness to learn, and my desire to be a part of community. I never was ambitious enough to say, oh, someday I want to be the executive director. And I don't know that the part of the culture at Friendly House is, I don't feel like an expert on anything. I feel like our teams are definitely experts in their field, and I have infinite faith in their abilities. And so when I came into this position, I think one of my anxieties was this sense that I had to know everything. And the realization over time that I couldn't know
Right.
or learn everything. There was no way.
And you saw something different because, again, you were there as an employee. And when your long-term ED retired after 35 years, they did bring an outsider in.
That's right.
How was that transition? Because
Yeah. So, I think as I was telling you, I had always thought I would apply for the ED position, and I knew that my mentor was leaving. But just before her retirement, we very unexpectedly lost my 19-year-old daughter, and my father was dying also at the time. So I knew that I wasn't in any position to be what the organization needed at that point. And so the board brought in somebody new, and I think it wasn't the right fit for a variety of reasons, and it was also during COVID, and I try to think about what that must have been like for her to learn this organization where you have all of your staff, your leadership staff have been there forever. You haven't even set foot in the building yet. That was an impossible position for her. But I think also it for a number of reasons, it wasn't a great fit. But what it did for our teams was, it bonded us in a way that I don't think anybody expected. And it ultimately, when she left that position, it was a year later, and I had done some of my own healing. And it felt like, why not? I was going to be able, hopefully, to do better than the last go. And so it was maybe the push that I needed. But I think having come up through Friendly House, that certainly my core values as an individual had been shaped by this organization. So there was really no question of alignment of purpose.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because we asked you about what your personal values are, and it was hard for you to differentiate your own from the organization's, which is, I think, probably the most perfect example of a leader who's in alignment. If you're so congruent in what you hope for and what your vision is of the way that you work, I would imagine that was you couldn't have a more supportive environment to step into. And then,
right.
It sounds too, you've spoken about agency, listening and caring about others. And it sounds like you were extended a lot of agency in your role.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I had opportunities to try new things in ways that I don't think I would have found in other positions. And I hope that that's what we are still doing for staff that are coming in. We tend to be a training ground for folks, because of the nature of nonprofit pay, which is embarrassing at times and something that we're working on constantly. But people come in and get a lot of experience. And so, when we're looking at bringing new people in, we're really looking at people who are motivated, want to learn, believe in the values, and have good intuition. And what their job was before doesn't matter as much as that they're willing to be there, eager to learn, and have a good sense of right and wrong, and believing in the community mission.
And we say that all the time, that a lot of organizations hire for skill set.
Yeah.
What's their experience? Do they have the right degree? And it's very specific. But we also see you fire on fit.
Yeah.
So if there's not
That's
that
right.
alignment between goals and values, it doesn't matter what somebody's skill set is.
I fully believe that. I fully believe that. I would rather take a chance on somebody exploring something that they're really excited about than somebody that's been doing it for 20 years and might know exactly what to do, but dealing with burnout or whatever it might be. And, it's an investment. And we recognize that, but I think most of the time it's really worthwhile.
Absolutely. And then I think it's interesting you talk about being a training ground, because that in itself also is a different mindset of, I'm going to hire this person and they're going to be here for 20 years.
Yeah.
And to look at that and really then develop that person to take those skills somewhere else.
And I think this is an area, you and I were talking about this, and I think this is an area that we can be working on. I think we've always sort of thought of ourselves as a training ground, but I think that there are opportunities to be a lot more intentional about that. And also just recognizing that I think people don't necessarily stay committed to the same job or same organization in the same way that they did 20 years ago. That's not a feather in anyone's cap in the way it maybe was once. People move on. And I think a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how to address that. And particularly in nonprofit or when you're working with government contracts that may be, they're very complex. And how do you be more efficient in getting someone trained up sooner? Because for a case manager, for example, it could be a year before they feel ready to go out on their own and do the work, and particularly for someone who's really green. But what are the pieces that we need to put in place to help them feel good about their work sooner and make it less complex. And unfortunately, when it comes to government contracts, we have limited influence on that. But how do we really embrace this? And that's something that we have been thinking about and talking about more as an organization. And
I'm curious because it's just a little bit of a different paradigm if you sort of, when you're bringing talent onto your team or when you start a new endeavor, you have to have in the back of your mind that this person may not be here for a very long time. And so you want to support their own growth, but you also need to accomplish, objectives at your organization.
Yeah.
So how does that change the hiring paradigm or the intentionality you bring to who you hire?
I think we're still sorting that out, to be really candid. I think we started to see some of that pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, it's been very clear that, many people are not, this is not going to be a life career for them. And so, again, kind of figuring out how to balance the needs of accomplishing what we're set out to do, recognizing that it's going to be, it may be a shorter time with this person. So part of it is making sure that our, everything has to be written down. And I think like in nonprofit, we tend to store a lot of institutional knowledge in people, and you can risk losing culture that way. And so one of the things that we're really looking at is how do you build certain things into job descriptions that maybe you hadn't thought to include before. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because one of the beauties of being at a place like Friendly House is having some flexibility to bring in your own interests and ideas and being able to show your strengths and make your job a little bit your own versus making sure that you have everything that needs to be covered in a single job description. And I think we're really kind of still exploring what that looks like. Right after the pandemic, and we were getting 3 and 4 people for every job description that went out. And it was very, very slim pickings for a while. People were able to make almost as much flipping burgers as they were like taking on huge responsibility for children or older adults or houseless family and friends. So I think we're still working through that some.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're, very openly vulnerable as a leader, because I think that's such a sign of strength. Personally, it's pretty inspiring.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it shapes not just what does the next 90 years look like at your organization, but you're affecting every single person that comes into that door. And you're intentionally saying, we will train, we will grow you, we will work with you. And when you were talking, I was thinking, how awesome, because you're allowing people to give their opinions. You can be creative and think of things differently that some organizations, this is the way we do it because we've always done it.
Yeah.
You have that innate culture that you are going to flex and change.
I think some folks coming in would still say, oh, we've done, that's what they hear. We've done it this way for 90 years. It's not perfect, but we have tried a lot also in 90 years. And there is still, a ton of institutional knowledge, at least particularly on our leadership team. And so finding that flex point between people who have, coming in new saying, oh, why don't you try this, versus the person who's been there 30 years saying, well, we did that once and it didn't work, and recognizing that it's a different time. It could work now. And kind of massaging that balance is something that we're constantly playing with and talking about. And transparency is another issue. I think, again, during COVID, everybody sort of went into their own silos, and people no longer knew what one one part of the organization was doing and another. Right now, we're at a point of like really trying to be more transparent, provide more information in more different styles than we ever have before. But that thing of like transparency, openness to change, I would say that partly it's new leadership, right? Like I'm coming in with, I do things very differently from my predecessor, who was wonderful, and she was an extraordinary mentor to me, but we're also very different people. And so partly it's me figuring out my lane. Partly it's the organization recovering from a major upheaval. And I think we're working together to figure these things out.
And so on your leadership team, it sounds like you've been very stable there.
Very.
And I think then that helps you create, this is my lane, this is my world. And if you were looking at bringing in somebody at that leadership position, where would your values and your experience lie? Would you want to bring in somebody super experienced, grow that talent? Yeah.
So, excuse me, we go back and forth about that too. Like one of the things is wanting to bring somebody up, right? We have all of these line staff or program managers who are doing really great work and wanting to create opportunities for them to step into leadership. I think the other thing that we look at is the majority of our leadership team right now are folks who have come up through Friendly House. And we don't, between all of us, we don't have a ton of outside experience besides Friendly House. And that was sort of one of the only concern I had about coming into this position was, does Friendly House need new blood right now? You know, is this the right time for that? And we tried it. You know, I feel good about the fact that we did try that before I stepped in. But I think at the leadership team level, that's kind of the next time we're going to be tested. And it will be a couple of factors. Is, do we have somebody ready to come in? Because that's kind of our values, and that's very likely what we would do if that were an opportunity. But it limits us as far as kind of understanding trends and other practices in other organizations. So I think we have to be really mindful about keeping ourselves, everyone on our leadership, out there, you know, visiting other places, meeting new executive directors, you know, sitting on trainings and, you know, keeping those things in the forefront because we can get tunnel vision.
You've been on such a journey. I mean, it's really fascinating, and I am enjoying learning from you right now. If you were able to go back in time and offer your younger self advice about leadership, what would that advice be?
So I was very insecure. Like I had a ton of, what is it called?
Self-doubt?
Well, yes, that works too. Because, I mean, partly because I didn't have specific education to be there, and concerned that it was, you know, was it my history there that was helping me to move forward? And it wasn't until I realized that even if it was my history, that wasn't a bad thing, that to learn to embrace that, that my history with the organization is valuable, just like everybody else's. And I would also tell myself that I didn't have to know everything to be a good leader or a good supervisor, and to trust the people around me. That I am supported by extraordinary people every day, and not only just good managers but the most amazing people I know. And these are the people who have gotten me through some of the hardest times in my life personally. We, you know, whether or not HR says it's a good idea, we tend to be friends. We've all grown up together in many ways. And that gives a lot of grace both ways, and so I think I would remind my younger self of those things, and that leadership is as much about putting your faith in the right people as it is being the right person,
Wow.
And I think that's the perfect segue. This podcast is called Hiring for Good. And good has so many different connotations to it, whether it's retention, good for the community, good for the person. What does hiring for good mean to you?
You guys, I saw this question and it has just been rattling around in my head for a week. It means a lot. I love the title of your podcast. It's kind of all of it, right? Like, I have this deeply held fundamental belief that every human being walking the face of the earth is doing the very best they can with the tools that they have. And it doesn't mean everybody is the best employee or the right fit. But taking the time, I have really been swimming in this question. Hiring is a bit of a crapshoot, right? Like, we have this little bit of time to get to know somebody. We're all sort of trying to sell each other on each other. And it's very hard to kind of be authentic in those moments. And I think when you find those people who are willing in an interview to be vulnerable or to talk about, that question is what are your strengths and your weaknesses? And that person who will really say, like, here's what I'm really good at. Here's where I'm going to need help. Like, those are the things that I key into. And I just think if we can, again, keeping our values and our community building mission, like, our responsibility is just to bring community in. And that includes staff who are community, or managers who are community, or Tai Chi practicers, or pickleball players. And that the more that we can bring in folks who are authentic and honest and full of integrity and a willingness to learn and a willingness to engage, that's just good for everybody all the way around.
Well, that's beautiful.
I know it.
Thank you so much. It is really just an honor to have these conversations.
Thank you.
I feel like every time I walk away with new insight about what it means to lead and the different energy and vision people bring to their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. It has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.